This is our September call. We're out here in the San Francisco Bay Area. It's the home of our presidential candidate. We couldn't be more thrilled to see her on the ballot. And we're really excited to have you all here tonight to get the latest updates on the election. Our agenda is a little bit different from previous meetings. I'll spend a few minutes laying the land as far as the landscape goes for us and our position as Democrats going into November. We'll talk about the road to the House, which is blue. It goes through California and New York. We'll talk about a redder road to the Senate through Ohio and Montana. Then we'll talk about the new roads to the White House and what Kamala has done as far as opening up different pathways to win the White House. And then we'll do a deeper dive into those super battleground states which hold both the key to the presidency, the Senate, and the House: Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, and Arizona. Then our voter outreach teams will present their programs and how you can work and volunteer in these critical last few weeks to get out the vote. And then again, that Q&A at the end. It's a very information-heavy hour. Sometimes we go close to the end of the hour, but again, I'm happy to stay over and answer your questions as need be. Next slide, please. So just to get us all on the same page, we are very focused on the races that will win us a trifecta. These are toss-up races. Toss-up races are defined as races that can be won, usually won by less than 3 points. They are essentially tied, and turnout is what determines which side wins. The other thing about toss-up races is that there are many things that can affect those as we move closer to the election. Certainly, the change in the ticket was one that completely turned around a lot of our maps. But a lot of these things are things that we can, as volunteers and grassroots, influence. Voter registration is an area that can greatly impact a toss-up race because the margins are so small. We have checked that box because we have seen a 175% increase in voter registration across the country since Kamala took control of the ticket, especially among women, people of color, and the youth vote. The side with the best organizing has a huge advantage in a toss-up race, and we check that box too. We simply have more grassroots. We have a more sophisticated remote operation that now, for the first time in recent memory, we're going to be able to combine with a very robust on-the-ground canvas operation. The last 2 years, the last 2 cycles, we've been more heavy on the remote side. Now we're going to be able to do it all, and that will give us a big advantage in November. Fundraising, we've led throughout the race. We are seeing that now paying off in a better field operations among our candidates. But this is the time of year where Republican dark money does come flowing in. We're starting to see that in some of our races. And this is really the only strength that Republicans have in getting out the vote is the ability to flood the airwaves with negative dark ads. But mostly what affects turnout is voter enthusiasm, and that is where we have a huge lead. Next slide, please. This graph is voter enthusiasm over the last few presidential elections, and the gold bar for voter enthusiasm was Barack Obama in 2008. 80% of Democrats were enthusiastic about voting that year, and you can see a very, very low number of Republicans, and that explains the sort of huge win that he had that year. In 2016, Republicans had the edge in voter enthusiasm, and we know how that turned out. In 2020, it was essentially a tie. They were very, very close, and we had a very, very close election. Well, right now, Kamala's enthusiasm among Democrats for voting is 78%. If that holds and we can keep that enthusiasm going through Election Day, we will likely win this election. Her voter enthusiasm is higher than Biden's was in 2020, but also importantly, Republican enthusiasm is lower than it was in 2020. And that's going to create this shift, this gap, that we certainly won't win this election by 14 points, but it will definitely have an impact on Election Day. And how that interacts with the polls is why we want to look at those likely voters. The likely voters are going to, the likely vote polls are going to encompass and include that enthusiasm factor. And that's why she's does better among likely voters. We also, when we look at polls tonight, we want to look at undecideds. How much undecided vote is there? Some states and some areas have larger amounts than others, but where she's got votes to get is where we want to focus our efforts. A lot of polls that we see and that we hear about are actually polling averages. And that's fine for a Senate race that's been going on forever and a day. But her race has been very, very short. It's only been a few weeks. So polling averages are not the best way to look at where she is strategically. It's better to look really from week to week to see how she's doing. And she is gaining every single week. Where she is right now is much higher than she was last week. So a polling average, I think, does her a big disservice right now. We also need to consider the margin of error in our polls. They are as much as 4 points. Until you start polling over that margin of error, so above 3 to 4 points, you're essentially should be considered a tie. We need to approach these races as ties. She could be way up, but she could also be way down. So we want to approach all of these, most of her races as ties. Next slide, please. So I'm going to start in the Senate, knowing what you know now about toss-up races and those margins and what works. The Senate is going to be 50-50 in November. We're at 51 right now, but we will lose West Virginia. So we're going to come into November tied. There's about a third of the Senate seats are up for election every year. This year, 34. 7 of those races are competitive. All of the other ones are fairly secure for Republicans and Democrats. The challenge is that all of those 7 races are ours. We have to defend seats everywhere, and we don't have a pickup opportunity like we did in 2022 when we had John Fetterman's seat. So all the Republicans have to do is win one race, and they win the Senate, and that's what makes it challenging. We don't have an opportunity. Some people do want to count Texas and Florida and maybe Nebraska in that, but we don't have the votes there. These are states that have very high turnout rates. We don't have the organizing structure in place. We don't want to go down that rabbit hole of putting resources and money and time into races that aren't winnable. So we need to focus on what we have, and we've done a good job. That's been a great strategy, because out of those 7 races, which were originally all considered toss-ups, 5 of them now have been moved to us. Arizona, Nevada, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin are considered lean Democratic races right now. Not totally secure, but we are very hopeful that we'll be able to win those with a robust campaign and voter outreach effort. We have 1 toss-up in Ohio, and then our challenge is going to be Montana, which is now a lean Republican race. Next slide, please. So the road to the Senate is red. It will go through Ohio and Montana, assuming that we are able to hold those other 5 states. There's a lot of similarities between these 2 candidates and these 2 states, but also some very important, and now it is obviously becoming a defining difference between the 2 campaigns. Both of these men have been winning in red states for decades. They get a lot of crossover Republican support. Brown is more of a manufacturing, working class politician, and Tester campaigns and lives by his commitment to rural America. But Ohio isn't quite as red as Montana is. He doesn't need quite as much crossover vote as Tester does. He wins by about 6 to 7 points, 8 points sometimes in Ohio. That's a pretty large margin in a red state. He's quite iconic, kind of a unicorn there. He's been polling at about 5, +5 for months now. Very weak candidate in Bernie Moreno. This is still considered a toss-up because of the fact that the voter registration just does favor Republicans. Trump won this state by 8 points in 2020, but he won Montana by 16. And so the amount of Republican votes that Tester has to get is quite a bit more. And Montana has changed over the last few cycles. It's used to be the oldest state in the country as far as the median age. It has become a lot younger. A lot of that really very devoted, loyal vote that he had is gone now. And it is becoming things like development and people coming in from out of state and buying up property. New industry and new business has changed the vote. We've got a lot of MAGA Republicans, a lot of business-minded Republicans that are there now that have just changed the electorate for him. He's still within it. His polling is as high as 5 or as low as 5. but his challenge is going to be a little bit steeper. He has a stronger opponent in Tim Sheehy. There is a libertarian that often helps him out. Polling is sparse, very, very sketchy, but he has recently been moved to a lean Republican. That isn't really due to polling. It's due to the enormous amounts of money that are flooding into Montana. There's only about 700 voters in Montana, which is less than some of our districts here in California. But the amount of money that's being spent there will likely top $100 million this year. The Republicans know this is their best chance. They have pulled money out of multiple other races and just thrown it all in here. He's doing the best he can to keep up. We're helping him as best we can, but we're not willing to pull money out of those other states. And so unfortunately, this race might not be much so won by Republicans, but bought by Republicans. But he's still in it, still a lot of work to do. It's way too early to write him off, but this was a little bit of a disappointing week for Montana. Next slide, please. So moving on to the House, the Senate situation makes the House even more critical that we win. This is the map of toss-up House races across the country. Those are red and blue. Can you move back just one, Betsy, please? Move back one slide. Great, thank you. It looks like it's a redder House than it is, but Republican districts are very large and rural. Our districts are small and more urban, clustered on the coastlines primarily. But we are only 4 seats off from a majority. 218 is the magic number out of that 435. We have 214 right now. We just need to net 4 seats. That's very doable. That's an easy map, especially with some of those political headwinds that I mentioned at the beginning of the hour. Only 25 seats are competitive. That is historically low. We used to have hundreds available each 2 years. But we are a very gerrymandered and polarized country right now. So just down to 25 that we have to focus on. 12 of those we have to hold. We have 13 opportunities to flip. Out of that, we just need to net 4 new seats. The House is the line in the sand, and that's a quote from Rudy Salas, who's one of our candidates in California here that we have been working for most of the year. And he came and talked to our phone bank a few months ago and used that line, and it really kind of stayed with me. And what he meant by that is, if Kamala wins, we have to give her a chamber for her to be able to enact her agenda, for a tool that she can use to be successful. If she doesn't have one of the chambers, either the Senate or the House, she will probably be a one-term president. She will not be able to get anything done. And the House right now is a little bit easier to grasp than the Senate. If she loses, having the House will be the only thing that really stands between us and Project 2025 coming to pass here. It will be the way that we can keep a Republican trifecta from going too far. The thing about the House that's also so important is when it comes to voter outreach, the presidential race and Senate races are very compelling. Everybody wants to work on them, and that's great, and we should, and it's natural. It's not as likely that people from across the country are going to want to come into somebody else's congressional race. They're lower profile. We haven't heard of the candidates before. It's really up to the people that live in a state that has a congressional race to make that a top priority. And that's what we've done here at IndiMarin. We're very, very focused on the House. And I think you'll see that when we talk about our voter outreach, although we are also working in Senate and the presidential race. It is our top priority. We can't expect anybody else to come in and do it for us. We have to sort of cover our own backyard. Next slide, please. So this is what the road looks like. On the left-hand side are those races that we need to hold. There's 12 of them. We won them in 2022 by an average of about 4.2. You can see that back in 2020, Trump only won a few of them. On the Republican side, on the right-hand side, all those red states are districts that we're trying to flip. If we can flip 4 of those and hold the others, we will take over the House. The Republicans are not as in a strong position as we are. They only won these races 2 years ago by a little over 2 points. And you can see that Biden in 2020 won almost all of them. So we are in a stronger position. We know that in presidential elections, Democrats vote more than in midterms. So these are midterm results here. We're going to come in even higher this year, and we are simply in a better position to gain seats than Republicans are. And that's reflected in the generic vote, which is a poll that asks voters, would you rather see Democrats or Republicans in charge? And this, since Kamala has joined the ticket, has gone up now. It's actually really over 3 points right now. This is an average, the 2.6, but is creeping up a little bit every day. Again, showing her down ballot bounce that she's giving. Next slide, please. All right, getting into the presidency. This is the electoral college map. Again, those yellow districts are the toss-ups. These are the 7 states that always elect the president. A couple of months ago, this map looked very different. When Biden stepped aside, most of those yellow beige states were actually pink and had moved to lean Republican. And she, in a matter of just a few weeks, was able to return the map completely back to its baseline at the beginning of the year, which is these 7 states as toss-ups. We wouldn't expect to get any better than that. They've always been toss-ups. They will for the foreseeable future. But to get back to that point so quickly was fairly extraordinary. You need 270 electoral votes to win. We're at 226, assuming all the other states stay the way they're color-coded there. We need just 44 to win the presidency. Republicans need a little bit more. These 7 states are usually divided into 2 groups. The Rust Belt, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin are usually called the blue wall because within those 3 states are the 44 seats that we need, or the 44 votes that we need in order to win the presidency. And we tend to do a little bit better historically in these 3 states than Republicans. The Sun Belt states, Nevada, Arizona, North Carolina, and Georgia, are traditionally a little bit stronger for Republicans. There's been crossover wins, definitely over time, but traditionally that's the way it breaks out. Next slide, please. This is the state of the presidential race as of yesterday. She's up about 3 points. At the beginning, when she took over the ticket, Biden was down by 5 points. And so in a very quick period of time, she has really moved this almost 8 points in an incredibly short period of time. Just to compare that, though, to where other recent Democratic presidential candidates have been, Biden was at 4.5. So she's not there yet, but we have started to see this week some national polling for her that shows her at 4 to 5 points. Clinton was up just by 2. That was her final popular vote margin, but of course she lost, as did Al Gore, whose popular vote margin was 0.5. The magic number seems to be around 2.5 to 3 points. Historically, if you win the popular vote by that much, you do win the Electoral College. But our elections are a lot different. Our electorate is a lot different now. We're a lot more polarized. So can't promise that that would hold, but that's sort of the magic number. Next slide, please. So her road could look a lot different than Biden's. She's stronger with different demographics than he is. She could end up with the same road, the same roadmap to winning, but she's opened up 2 states that have never looked that strong in the past for Biden. Georgia, he did win Georgia. First time in 20 years a Democrat has won Georgia, but just by 0.3. And he benefited that year from that very intense Senate race that we had there with Warnock and Ossoff. Warnock was an incredible draw for the African-American vote, and certainly he helped ride that momentum. Unfortunately, Georgia has seen quite a lot of voter suppression since that time. But right now, her polling is just about where Biden was. It's essentially a tie, maybe a little bit less, but she's right within that margin, which is a remarkable achievement. But most people seem to think she has a little bit of a better chance in North Carolina. Obama's the only person the only Democrat that has won North Carolina in decades. He won it in 2008, but the races are very close, and we have won the governorship there several times during that time. So Democrats can win across the state. Trump did win it by 1.3 in 2020. Her polls are similar right now to Georgia. She's essentially tied, maybe down a slight, 0.25%, but essentially tied. She's going to be helped, though, by a down ballot candidate. The governor race in North Carolina is extremely intense with a very unpopular Republican running. Our Democratic candidate there, Josh Stein, is up almost double digits now. And it's possible that that could have the same effect that Warnock had in 2020, and that she can help ride some of that momentum and that enthusiasm to eking out a very small win in North Carolina. So we're seeing the campaign do a lot of work in North Carolina, not something I think that Biden was planning on doing. So perhaps she has her own road to the House and it may go through the South. Next slide, please. Going to the super battlegrounds, this is that blue wall. If she wins these 3 states, she will be the president. But these are tougher for her. We know that she doesn't do as well in that white working class demographic as Biden did. That's one of the reasons that Obama chose him for his vice president way back in 2008. He has been able to deliver these states consistently. Michigan is the bluest of all of them. It was his best state in 2020, won by almost 3 points. She's polling at about half of that right now. So that's been a little bit disappointing. And again, it probably revolves around that white working class vote. Alyssa Slotkin is our Senate candidate there. She's doing quite well. She's running in an open seat because of her retirement, but has run an excellent campaign. She's a current member of the House and looks like she's going to be able to pull out a win there. Her polling has been anywhere from 5 to 10 points over the last couple of months. There are 2 major House races, Michigan 7 and Michigan 8, that are holds. So Michigan, as usual, is a big focus of the election. Pennsylvania is always the big prize. It has the most amount of votes, 19. It's also one of the tougher ones for us to win in the Rust Belt. Biden won it by just 1.2. We have a smaller voter registration lead there than in just about any of these other states. Harris is leading there, though, not by much, but approaching his margins. One will be tight. It always is. But to bring back the vote here was especially impressive for her. Incumbent Senator Bob Casey is the Senate candidate. He is also running a tight campaign. It's just a close state, but he is expected to be able to pull that out. 2 major House races in Pennsylvania, 7 and 8. If you live in Pennsylvania, you've got a lot to do. There's a lot going on in Pennsylvania. They have the opportunity to flip their last remaining state house and become a Democratic trifecta. They have other statewide issues on their ballot. So it's always a big election in Pennsylvania, and it's always one of the most crucial ones in the country, and this year is no different. Wisconsin is a little bit of a surprise. Biden won it by just 0.6. We know Wisconsin is a 50-50 state, and elections are always close there. We are helped this year by the Senate race. Tammy Baldwin is the incumbent senator. She's extremely popular and has been riding a fairly large vote polling margin there all year. She has a very weak opponent. And Harris, this is her best state. She's up almost 3 points there now. That's at the margin of error, possibly helped by Tim Walz's being on the ballot because he's right next door in Minnesota. And that could be helping her there. But this is definitely her strongest state. They are extremely well organized in Wisconsin. It's one of the strongest, if not the strongest, Democratic Party in the country. Next slide, please. The last 2, Arizona. This is a tough one for Democrats. Biden won it by just a little less than half a point. This was the first time a Democratic presidential candidate has won the state in 20 years. We are helped this year by another exceptionally strong Senate candidate, Ruben Gallego, who's been polling quite high the entire year, running against Kari Lake, who is not very popular in Arizona. Arizona's votes are decided by the independent vote. It's their largest block. We actually are the smallest block in Nevada, in Arizona, but are helped tremendously by a democratically leaning independent vote. 2 major opportunities to flip House seats there. They also, on a statewide level, have the ability this year to flip their entire state legislature blue. They were the state that tried to pass that 1865 ban on abortion, and that is really driving up a huge amount of voter enthusiasm in Arizona. They have a reproductive rights initiative on their ballot. And although Harris is down a little bit, this is actually one of the states that she's made her biggest margin in. Biden was down almost 6 points just a few weeks ago in this district, and she has brought it back into basically a statistical tie with still weeks to go. Nevada looks a little bit better. This is a state that Biden won pretty convincingly by toss-up districts, by toss-up district standards, a little over 2 points. Nevada's an unusual state. The electorate changes frequently there. They have a very transient population, a lot of seasonal work. It's kind of hard to predict every couple of years what Nevada is going to do. We did well there in 2020, not so well in 2022, but our incumbent Senator Jackie Rosen has an enormous lead and has really the most secure of all of these Senate candidates. They have reproductive rights initiatives on their ballot this year. Harris is essentially tied, but on the positive side of that, and also continues to gain a little bit of momentum with each poll. Next slide, please. Before I turn this over to our teams, I wanted to go through a little bit of her coalition and what position she's really in right now. There's a lot of conflicting information out there. But to summarize it, when Biden left the ticket, Trump was up about 5 points and moving rapidly in that direction. 3 to 6 points, we were behind in those 7 states, again, losing momentum by the week. Within 6 or 7 weeks, she had brought that up to a lead for herself of 2, and it's now climbing more in the 4 to 5 range. And it's important that we look at how that happened. How did she manage to do that so quickly? And why is she still not at Biden's levels of 2020? A lot of the vote that Biden lost, he didn't lose it because of issues about issues. He didn't lose it because people disagreed with what he'd done over the last 3 years. He lost it because people were not confident that he could win in November and did not have faith that he was healthy enough or strong enough to really take on that role. Some of them moved to third-party candidates. A few maybe have moved to Trump, but it was basically soft, undecided vote that was just sitting out there. And they wanted a new candidate. And when they got one, they came back very, very quickly to her. Not completely, but very quickly. But she continues to have a little bit of a gap with Biden. And what is with that? What's causing it? Is it, what can we do to change it? Is it due to third-party candidates? Probably not. We've spent a lot of time this year talking about Kennedy and his candidacy. He is out of most of the races now. We know he's endorsed Trump and he's telling his voters to vote that way. He's on 2 ballots that he could not get out of, and that's Wisconsin and Michigan. Had to go to the Supreme Court in North Carolina to get him off that one, and they've had to actually delay their election there to accommodate a new ballot. He wouldn't have done that, and Trump wouldn't have probably paid for it unless he really was a threat to Trump. And it looks like in what little polling we have now where he's still on the ballot, that if anything, he is still hurting Trump a little bit. Jill Stein is running on the Green Party ticket that normally would draw from Democrats. Chase Oliver is a Libertarian candidate that is on many of our battleground states. It looks like they have minimal effect on the ballot. They both tend to cancel each other out, if anything. So most political pundits and the articles that I've read and the research I've done feel that third-party candidates will not be a factor, that by election day, most of the vote will have dissipated. Often these voters don't vote at all, or will return to the candidate that is closest to them, and it won't be in enough numbers to affect the final outcome. But she does still have a gap. So if it's not due to third-party candidates, what is it due to? Her strength, where she's pulled in more votes than Biden, is among African Americans and women, but he was already leading among those groups pretty significantly. She is pulling more of the youth vote, but he is pulling white people and men. And that's where her weakest area is. And that doesn't surprise anyone. I don't think anyone would be surprised to see sexism and racism be part of this election. But there's some other things that we need to look at too. Why is she running so far behind some of these Senate candidates? Why isn't it more equal at this point? And why is when her favorability is extremely high? She has a 50% of favorability, which is very hard to do in the United States. That means basically everybody that is the Democrat favors her, has good positive feelings about her, but it's not quite reflected in the voting yet. And the answer to that is just that enthusiasm. When you look at polling, when you look at focus groups, the thing that comes out the most is, I don't know her. I need to know more about her. For us in California, we're very familiar with her, but for the rest of the country, they didn't really know her before she was picked. And since then, vice presidents keep a pretty low profile. And it is that reason that I think we're seeing this bump that a lot of people didn't predict, but a bump in her numbers after the debate, because that answered for many people that question. And a lot of pundits felt like she would get no bump at all from debates. Usually people don't this late, but she definitely has. That's because that question is being answered. But there's still a lot of soft vote out there. There's a lot of undecided vote. There's a lot of people that are sitting out there that just need to know more about her. The challenge for her is she doesn't have a lot of time. Normally, a candidate like this would have a year, 6 months, 8 months, 10 months to get voters to know them, to get them familiar with her. And she doesn't have that time. She also doesn't have time to go out and partner with Senate candidates, on congressional candidates, House candidates down ballot that you would normally see in a long election year. So that's where we come in. We have to be her surrogates. We have to be her voice. We have to keep that enthusiasm going. If we can keep that enthusiasm, her name out there, the conversations going, and keep her enthusiasm gap that high, we will win the election. But she definitely needs us. And so for the rest of the hour, we're going to talk today about how to do that, where to work, when to work, and get her and what she needs, which is a Senate and a House, so that she can be successful and be more than a one-term president. It's important, before I pass this over, to just remind people that the time to get the training, to take advantage of all these things is now. We don't want new volunteers the week of the election or the week before the election. We want everybody working. We don't want to be spending time training a lot of people. Many of the groups and campaigns that have phone banks and text banks will be closed to new volunteers the week of the election. So this is the time to get started. We have great campaigns. It's time to get ready for that all-important get out the vote period. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Betty, and she's going to start tell you about our phone banking program. I will see you at the end of the hour, and I can answer your questions then.
Thanks, Lori. So phone banking is the most efficient way to have conversations with voters, and those conversations are crucial. So I'm going to just tell you a little bit about phone banking and hope that you'll join us in our efforts to educate voters and turn them out in November. So what happens at our phone banks? Well, first of all, we introduce the campaigns at every phone bank, and we choose our campaigns strategically according to 3 criteria. The first criteria is how close is the race. We don't call in races where a Republican or a Democrat is so far ahead that our calls won't matter. We pick close races. We also pick those races where the candidate really needs volunteers. Some candidates are over-resourced, and we tend to go with those who are under-resourced, but who look like they can win their election. And the final criteria is keeping our volunteers in mind. We always want a dialer that is easy and efficient. At every phone bank, we have mentors who are there to train you. We've got a wonderful team of mentors. You indicate your experience level at the beginning, and we place you into breakout rooms with mentors who will train you according to your experience level and among a group of peers who are at your experience level. You can call with a computer, a laptop, or a tablet, and your privacy is protected. The voter will only see a local number. They won't see your telephone number. And really what we do is we educate voters. We give voters information that allows them to exercise their right to vote. And that's information about candidates, about issues, and about options for voting early or on election day in their state. We also, at the end of every phone bank, debrief, and in that we share calls and tips, and we build a sense of community. And I always say it doesn't matter if somebody comes to every single phone bank or once a month, you will find yourself among a group of like-minded people, and that goes a long way to easing anxiety and just inspiring you to recognize how many good people are out there and willing to give their time to the country and for our children and our grandchildren. So right now, our campaigns from now until November 5th are for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz and for Rudy Salas, who is running for Congress in California's 22nd Congressional District. We've been calling for Rudy since February. He's a fantastic candidate. And as Lori said, California is key to taking back the House. So we run 2 phone banks a week. One is on Tuesdays from 4 to 6 p.m. Pacific time, and that would be 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern time. And then on Saturday mornings, 9:30 to 11:30 a.m. Pacific time, and that's 12:30 to 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. Okay, so next slide, please. So what is coming up for us is the final sprint. Next line, Betsy. So from November 1st to November 5th, that is going to be our Get Out the Vote effort. Go ahead, Betsy. And you can just click them all and then I'll just read through it. So we're going to offer 2-hour phone banks a day. So that's 4 hours of phone banking from November 1st to November 5th, Friday to Tuesday. And you can sign up for a 2-hour shift. And we will be there. If you want to stay longer, you can. For the last several months, our phone bankers have been weeding out wrong numbers, people who are Republican and not supporting Kamala, people who have moved, so that when it comes to these final days, we are using the cleanest, leanest lists to get out the vote. If we can turn out our voters, we're going to win this. And so the work we are doing now of cleaning those lists is really going to pay off when we use our time efficiently in those last 5 days. And as I said, we're providing vital voting information to people. So in those days, people are going to have all kinds of questions about polling sites, hours, where the drop boxes are there drop boxes? Because so many states don't have them. And these this information varies so much from state to state. So we will be answering a lot of questions at that time. But it's very important that you come and get trained now before October 29th, because these Get Out the Vote days are going to be for experienced phone bankers. We're going to have all hands on deck. So our mentors are going to be making calls on those days as well. So we would love to have you join us, and we'd love to have you join us now so we can get you fully trained, fully comfortable. And then when this final push comes for Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, and Rudy Salas, we're going to be able to push them over the finish line. So please consider phone banking. We'd love to have you, and you'll wake up November 6th and feel really great about the effort that you made. Okay, moving on. I can't remember, is the next one postcarding? It's Joy. It's Joy.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's so wonderful to have all of you here. You will see on the very top of this, we are so excited. We have sent 100,000 plus postcards. We actually the volunteerism has just grown and grown since Harris has been nominated. We are working 2 campaigns. One is in Ohio, that is to get out the vote. The other is in California, and that is for the House race for Adam Gray. That's California 13. We have 3 ways to postcard with us. So for all of you who are from out of state, we have an online request program. You go and you get your own supplies, make sure you've got your postcards, your stamps. You go to our website, which I think has been put into the chat. You will go in and request which campaign you want, how many addresses you would like. Those will be sent to you by Lori, who does that within 24 hours. You will have all the information, so anybody can do that. And for that campaign, we are doing California 13 and Get Out the Vote. For our other programs, which are in-person events and packet pickup program, right now we are just writing Get Out the Vote for Ohio. If you are local in Marin, we have 2 wonderful events where we meet in person every Tuesday at Panera in Novato from 10 to 11:30. Every Thursday night from 5 to 6:30 at a new place called Ounces in Northgate. We have groups of 30, 40 people who get together, they sit down and they write, and it's just a wonderful way to be with other people. Yes, we will also continue postcarding probably through to October 21st for everybody. And our campaigns will change. All that information is always available at our website. And since we end in October, all of those, you guys, you want to be trained in either phone banking or texting, which I'm going to turn over now to Susan Spitzer, who will tell you about texting so that you have other ways to keep getting out the vote. Next slide. And it's, Susan, I don't see you, but you're there.
Here I am. Yes,
You
here
are.
I am. So texting is a really good option if you like to reach out to a lot of voters. You're reasonably good with technology. You don't have to be some kind of technical whiz, but you do need to be able to use your laptop. We don't use your phone, even though it says texting and people think about, oh, that's going to be off my phone. It is not. That would definitely be too much input, too much input with your hand. So you use your computer to do the texting. People don't see your phone number. It's coming from, basically a centralized system where you reach out to people. And there's many different texting options out there. Right now, we have been focused on the Gavin Newsom texting. That is something we'll go over in a minute, how you can actually sign up to get training for this, because that program, even though it's Gavin Newsom, he's got a national training program and a national texting program that's reaching out to voters in every single state. And with similar to like phone banking, what we're trying to do is figure out, these are the people that are likely Democrats, and we're trying to get them out to vote. So texting, we're not sitting there trying to convince anyone of anything. We're just really reaching out and saying, hey, we think these people are supporters, so we want to get them voting. We want to get them to commit to voting. We want to share information about early voting. We want to get them to commit to a plan to do early voting. And so that as it gets closer and closer to the election, the text messages will change. It could be something like, now it's just, do you have a plan to vote? But then as it gets closer to the election, it will be, hey, do you know where your polling place is? Do you know what time you're supposed to be there? And all of that. So it really helps figure out who the supporters are, and it helps give them information that they need to vote and to commit to voting. Interesting thing about texts, I know you're probably all getting a lot of texts and you're like, oh, I don't want to get any more text messages. These aren't like fundraising things. We're not asking for money or trying to get anything out of anyone. We're really simply providing information to our supporters and trying to get our supporters out to vote. So most of the text messages, I know I get all these messages. I pretty much always look at them. I don't always respond, and sometimes I say stop because I don't want to get them anymore, but I always do read them. And so that's important, because when you're giving people information about dates, like dates they need to sign up to do early voting and registration dates and things like that, most of the people, 90% of the people, are actually reading these things regardless of whether they respond or not. So it is a very effective tool. We will share some links. We'll show you how to get to the links. But so as I mentioned, we've been using Gavin Newsom's national program for texting because it's got some good tools, good support, it's well funded. But also it looks like the campaign is now rolling out official texting for Kamala. So both of those links are going to be on our website under the Take Action menu item. Get signed up, join our texting team. There's basically, you can join our texting team, you get updates, you get help, you get support, but also you've got links that will take you directly to the training that these organizations are providing to get you directly into texting. And you can start this today. So like the Newsom campaign today is reaching out to voters in Ohio, making sure they have a plan, that they're committed to voting, and you can go get through the training and start those things tonight if you're so motivated to do it. I think it is, to me, it was super motivating for me to do this in the last election with Biden. I really felt like I got a lot of supportive responses back and people thanking me for doing what I was doing. And, you know, that far outweighed any occasional negative text that might come. So I would encourage you absolutely to give this a try. If you haven't, it's very flexible in terms of when you can do it. You don't need to be with a group of people. It doesn't need to be in person. So it's quite easy to watch a few training videos, take a short test, and then get added into their system and start texting. And we're always here to help you. So we've got coaches that can answer your questions, can get on the phone with you, help make sure that you're on the right track to getting started with texting. Okay, so I was mentioning before, so Team Gavin Newsom's national campaign, the link to this training is on our website. And we'll go through that a bit later in the presentation. So easy to get signed up, easy to find it at indivisibleMarin.org. Okay, I think that's it for texting. Canvassing is up next.
I'm talking very enthusiastically into my muted microphone. Sorry, this is Betsy, and you know, canvassing is the oldest form of outreach. It's how everyone communicated back in, you know, the 1700s when we started having elections, and it's still the most effective. But modern canvassing targets voters and based on targeted lists. So when you canvass, you're wherever you are, and we do offer canvassing in California in our battleground districts for those that live here. You know, we provide carpools, we provide housing if you spend the night, but we also have links that'll send you anywhere into any of the battleground states and provide support for you to stay for a day or a week. And when you canvass, you have a program in your phone, and it tells you which houses to go to. It'll tell you the background of those voters and who lives there, and that you collect information from them. And that's really what's the most important thing. You will find out mostly when I've canvassed in Adam Gray's district here in California, I go to houses of Democrats who are registered but have not voted in more than 3 of the last 5 elections. So we're going to infrequent voters, and we show up at their door and we ask them. I say, if I'm Adam Gray, what would you want to tell me right now? And people really open up. They're not used to being asked questions, and they're will talk to you more readily when you're standing in front of them versus you're a voice on the phone, or you're someone at the other end of a text string. And we will continue to canvass, and there are very sophisticated canvassing operations in all of the swing districts and states, and you're trained in how to have effective conversations. You're not going to Republican houses, and if you do, you'll mark them as Republican, and then no one else is ever going to go to that house. So you will have eliminated them for anyone else. And you listen. It's very collegial. You meet with a team beforehand. You often go out to dinner together. It's a great change from Zooming. And you always go with somebody too. If you're new, you will go with someone who's experienced. But I'll tell you, meeting voters, really meeting them face to face, is I don't know, it's a wonderful experience. You know, they tend to become this amalgam out there. The voters, what do the voters say? Well, now you're meeting the human beings there, and you're listening to them, and you're passing that information back on to the campaign. So I'd love you to consider canvassing. It is the oldest form of outreach and the most effective. And for those of you that have time, especially retired people, it's a wonderful use of your time. Thank you. And we do have a web page, which we will be talking to you, but it does have instructions on finding canvassing opportunities near you, wherever you are in this country. Okay, over to you, Susan.
Thanks, Betsy.
Sure.
So Dems Make Life Better is a offshoot of Indivisible Marin. It's a project we started up with the idea that with a simple T-shirt, all of us can become walking, talking billboards for Democrats. We've been asked by a lot of pundits over the last couple of election cycles to message in our daily lives for Democrats. It takes all of us messaging, but it's hard to find a way to message. Now on social media, the algorithms are deprioritizing political posts. So this is very simple. You're out in the real world, grocery shopping or running errands at the dog park. You're wearing this great positive, proud slogan for Democrats. It increases enthusiasm for existing Democrats, and it might spark some conversations with people that want to know more about our platform, which is on the back of the shirt. So this is a way that you can have conversations with potential voters in your daily life. The website is, if you want, just Google Dems Make Life Better, or you can find it at demsmakelifebetter.org. I will say that as we're getting close to the election, our products are union made and made to order. So it will take about 2 to 2.5 weeks to receive your products if you want to order. So encourage you to go ASAP and order if you want to participate in this form of voter outreach. We are not making a profit off of this. In fact, we're fairly significantly in the hole. If by any miracle we make a profit, we will donate those profits. So this is not about a profit. It's about spreading Dem messaging wherever we go. And especially powerful, of course, if you live in a battleground or any competitive district, but can be something to spur enthusiasm. And Lori talked about the importance of enthusiasm for all of us, wherever we go. Next slide, please. So a lot of you in the chat have been trying to keep up with all the questions about links and whatnot, but this slide is a screenshot of our website. You can see how simple it is. You can find us, just Google Indivisible Marin and then go to the Take Action section that's in the square rectangle there. And all of these things are drop-down pages. So if you want to phone voters, drop down to that. You want to write voters, drop down to that. And every link you need, all the explanations you need are there. So we will follow up tomorrow with a recording and links, but you don't need to wait till tomorrow. Tonight, when the call's over, please visit the website, review the pages, sign up. It's very, very user-friendly. Don't get hung up on, oh, I don't have the link, so I guess I need to wait. You can find it. It's very, very user-friendly. Next slide, please. So, boy, we're getting close. Just want to really say that as an organization, Indivisible Marin, we now have almost 10,000 volunteers, with about 40 of them in states other than California, 40%, I should say. And we have worked very hard to develop these programs and be available to all of you for training and support and to build a community. And really what we need now is for all of you to make that personal commitment. What can you do in the next 50 days to turn the tide of this election? It is tide. And there's a lot of structural advantages the Republicans have. So let's all make these next 50 days count, and the sooner the better. With that, I think we will go to Q&A. Is that right, Betsy?
Mhm.
Great.
I'll stop sharing now.
Okay, super. So, oh shoot, I lost bear with me a minute. I kept track of the questions in a Google Doc so that I can ask them of Lori, mainly Lori. Okay, so Sue is a question she had. And for any of you who need to leave, it is now the top of the hour. Feel free if you got the information that you needed and you want to go on with your evening. Thank you for coming. We appreciate your time. We hope that you will be inspired to take action. But for those of you who would like to stay, we will try to get to as many questions as possible. So back to Sue's question. Is there, and this goes to Lori, is there any indication that the Republicans supporting Harris Walz will also support down ballot Democrats?
It's a great question. The data that I have is from California, and that doesn't always happen. That people that are anti-Trump, but will vote for another candidate if they're not a MAGA candidate. So it really depends on who the other candidate is. If it's another MAGA, usually not, but there are some normal mainstream Republicans winning out there, and ballot splitting is definitely a phenomenon in the Trump era.
Okay, great. There was one question about a stat in Montana. It sounds like you may have said 700 voters. Did you mean 700,000?
700,000 voters, yes, and which is the size of not that much more than we have in a single congressional district here. Yeah, so apologize about that, but that's an unbelievable amount. And probably over $100 million are going to be spent in Montana to reach basically about 450,000 voters is what usually votes in an election there. So it's the age we live in.
And someone is asking or saying that they have limited funds for donating, and where should they donate to ensure the most essentially bang for their buck with electoral, well, specifically electoral votes.
Well, do you want to cover our donation
I can share
page?
this. I can share the page real quick.
We have a donation page. We came up with 2 ActBlue funds to fund the California congressional district races that need the most amount of help, and also the voter outreach organizations in California that do. But beyond that, we don't have recommendations for the whole country. It really depends. It's a personal choice where you go. The only thing I wouldn't do now is I wouldn't give to organizations this late in the game. I would give to candidates because it's just too late for an organization to really use that money, but the candidates could definitely use it. And I also wouldn't sign up for a month to month. At this point, it's too late. Just go ahead and make single donations. John Tester emailed me 15 times today for money, so I think that's probably a good place to go. All of the Senate candidates are in fairly good shape. The Senate race that's the closest as far as money is Bob Casey in Pennsylvania, but he also is still ahead of his opponent.
Right. And one thing that's been happening is that you probably all read about the Harris Walz campaign actually taking some of their funds and investing them in some of the down ballot races. So, I think that you can feel good that that the Democrats are working together and the money will be funneled to where it's needed by the DNC and other leaders. Let's see. And by the way, that page that we mentioned, our page on donating strategically, you'll find also under Take Action in the nav bar if you want to look at that page later. Let's see. Okay, a really important question here. What are some plans to make sure the elections are safe and that electors will certify them in the swing states?
Great question. A lot of people might have forgotten that in 2021, we passed a bipartisan bill. I think it's called, I can't remember the name of it, but it covers a lot of the things that happened in 2020. It prevents the vice president from doing anything but performing a ceremonial role. It tightens the requirements to file a lawsuit challenging any federal election result in the United States. It makes it much more difficult. The vast majority of lawsuits that Trump was able to file in 2020, he will not be able to file. And change the way the electoral votes are certified in states. It can no longer be done by state legislatures. It has to be done by a governor or a single elected official. So those kinds of things will make it harder to create a problem, but I think we all know that he's going to try no matter what the results. As far as election security goes, it's a state by state, county by county. We always hear this every election that, things are really dicey there. Each state is responsible for their own election security. I know it's really tight here in California, but it is certainly being looked at. The White House has a huge election security team that is sort of overseeing all of this. But we lived through it once, and no doubt we'll live through it again in January, I mean, in November.
Great. What are your thoughts on the Taylor Swift effect?
Um, uh, Probably not too much, but it's just part of keeping that enthusiasm up. The voters have very short attention spans, so we need to find a way to keep all of this enthusiasm going. And we got through the convention, that was a big bump, and now we've got a bump from the debate, but it could help. It can't hurt. 400,000 people registered supposedly within 24 hours of her posting that. Hope they were all in Pennsylvania and Michigan, but it can't hurt. I mean, all of that stuff, the social media and the whole TikTok world, I mean, that is something that we haven't really seen before, certainly not with the Biden campaign. It can't hurt. It can all only help. We'll see.
Okay, and maybe we can close with what is the $1 million question? And I think we all probably ask ourselves a few times a day. This comes from Brad. We're running against treason. How can that be 50-50?
Really good.
I
really
think
good
we're
question.
all just, it just defies reason, right? That it's 50-50. So, Lori, what is your best words of wisdom on that?
I think historians and psychologists will be looking at this for 100, 200 years. We'll be reading about it in history books. I think the major reason is that there are two different sets of information out there, and there's a lot of people that don't get the same information that we do. And so they make their decisions based on a different set of information that is patently false, but that's the best explanation. I mean, it's a cult, and we've seen it before in history over and over again with totalitarian leaders, and mainly they just have a different set of information than we do and can't control that. And some people vote purely on economics and really there is a group of people out there that believe that Trump cannot do the things that he's planning on doing, that somehow our government and our system will magically come in and keep him from doing anything dangerous. But they remember an economy that was better under him, and ultimately people often vote on their pocketbook. It's probably a combination of those things.
Yeah. And, Betsy just put something in the chat that I'd really like to underscore. And I think Lori addressed it as well earlier about the importance of voting early. And it's important for all of us to vote as early as possible and to be spreading that encouragement to everyone we know. And there's several reasons why it's so important. One is it makes campaigns more efficient, because once someone votes, they are taken, the fact that they have voted is they're taken off the lists for all of the outgoing calls and texts and postcards and everything. So we can help make the campaigns not waste their time reaching out to people who have already voted by voting early. The other thing is, as we're afraid, we are afraid about what might happen, what kind of voter suppression might happen, what potential violence or intimidation might happen at polling locations. As people vote early, their vote is more secure, whether they've done it through the mail or through a ballot box or going into the registrar of voters in their local county at the early voting dates. These are all ways to make it be less susceptible to these last minute maneuverings. So I really think the more that we can all spread the word about why early voting matters and will help Dems win, that could be another big contribution from all of us.
It will be a major part of the phone banks, text banks, is getting people to vote early. That's specific, making them make a plan to vote, giving you a date when they're going to vote, following up on them every day. Those campaigns check the voter rolls to see who's voted and who haven't. If they voted, they come off. If they don't, they get another phone call or a text. Ballot chasing will do it all the way through Election Day.
Right. And the blue voter guide that Betsy mentioned in the chat, and we'll be sure to include in the follow-up email to you guys, is a wonderful resource. it's not available in every county, I don't believe, but they do cover a lot of the country. And essentially what it is it's a website and you plug in your zip code and it gives you your ballot, you know, all of the different candidates and the ballot questions in most counties. And then you can see which organizations endorsed in what direction. So if, for example, you trust Planned Parenthood regarding any questions on abortion, you would be able to see, okay, Planned Parenthood encourages us to vote yes on, question 3. But that, if you trust a certain environmental organization, you could look and see what they encourage on some proposition that relates to climate. So it really is a great, it goes hand in hand with this voting early, because I think a lot of people sometimes procrastinate about voting because the ballot is intimidating because there's so many questions. They feel like they need to do a lot of research. They need to really, read up on every one of these ballot measures that can be very complex. So the Blue Voter Guide can make it way more efficient, and you feel like you can go through your ballot, see what reputable organizations, blue reputable organizations, because it's not a nonpartisan resource. It is a very partisan resource. It's called the Blue Voter Guide. So you can see what reputable Democratic organizations recommend you vote on the different questions and candidates for that matter. So it can be a really helpful resource. And I find it really helpful to share Blue Voter Guide with my family members, my daughters, who, are very, very busy and get kind of overwhelmed with the number of things on the ballot and end up, sticking it on the mail on the absolute last day. So just trying to encourage young people, everybody, to vote early. And this can be a great way to get over that worry about not doing one's homework. Okay, I think, well, let's see. Linda's bringing up the concern about mail-in voting and whether, we're still stuck with Louis DeJoy, which is a little bit of a head scratcher. But Lori, can you just speak to any legitimate concerns there may be about the US mail handling the load for mail-in ballots?
I think you can remember this exact same thing happened in 2020 and again in 22. The Republicans are going to scream about it. They want to suppress the vote, so they're going to make it look worse than it is. I have seen nothing out there that it's any more busy than any other. In fact, I remember talking to my post deliverer back in 2020. She said we can handle it. And the most of the law, not in every state, but most of the states, as long as you postmark it by election day, it doesn't matter how long it takes to get there. Now, there are some states that it has to arrive by election day, but the post office can handle it. I'm more worried about Joy being able to get enough postcarding stamps for all of our postcards, because the entire country is writing postcards and it's actually really hard to get the stamps right now, but they can handle it. It's all done by machines. So
Yeah.
It's a scare tactic. We shouldn't let people fall for it. We don't want to scare people away from voting by mail. And that's what they're trying to do. And then hope that half of them won't show up on election day because they don't want to wait in line that long.
Right.
So it's a scare tactic.
Yeah. And just in closing, because it is getting a little late, it's incumbent on all of us to maintain a positive outlook when we're talking to others, right? There is so much fear mongering, by the Republicans and in the media. The media they get more viewers or more readers by fear mongering with scary headlines. So as Lori just said, if we start repeating concerns about the post office isn't going to be able to handle it, we don't know how many people might then decide, I'm not going to bother. So we've got to really stay positive and make sure that we're not repeating stories that are coming from the other side. Okay, everyone. Lori, do you have any closing comments?
No, thank you guys for being here. What a great turnout. I've seen a lot of signups coming across my email right now. People are signing up for our phone banks and requesting addresses and texting. So great. We're here. We're going to be here. It feels like 24 hours a day until election day. Looking forward to seeing you all working with us.